Thank you very much. I'm really thankful to Feroz Sons for inviting me here to talk on a subject. Liver cancer treatment has already been given by Dr. Ramzan, and my job is to make the people realize that we need to detect the case, detect the patients early, so that we may be able to save them from all the treatments which have been done by, which can be given by uh, first of all, interventional radiologists and maybe surgeons. So, resource limited, we need to understand the etiology and we need to prioritize, number one. Number two, we need to understand the availability of screening tools and proper application of screening tools and how frequently do we miss an early liver cancer. Uh, if I look at my own data, I can safely say that 80% of cases by the time they present to us, they are in the palliative group. Another 15% are the ones who I can say that they are either in the intermediate range or maybe 5% are the ones which we are picking up at the right stage where we are able to bring a meaningful difference in their lives, in the survival. And starting from a chronic hepatitis to the liver cancer, we do have a long, long journey, and that gives us a window of opportunity to pick the cases, and that's the reason that early detection and screening of liver cancer based on the markers which have been given on the top, we can pick the cases at an appropriate stage, we can detect an early tumor and save the person from an unnecessary death, and starting from a small nodule to an actual liver cancer, there are certain changes that we need to look at, and obviously, the target is, first of all, a person should not be suffering from a disease which can lead to this problem. We have a big burden of hepatitis B. We have a big burden of hepatitis C. Dr. Asad has already highlighted the misfortune journey of hepatitis C elimination program in Pakistan. And now MEFIL Motapa is coming up very heavily. Alcohol problem is there, although we tend to keep our eyes away. And that's the reason that our focus, as in today, is mainly B, C, and MEFIL MASH. Dr. Bilal has very nicely given a good talk on MESIL and MEFIL earlier. So, hepatocellular carcinoma is the most prevalent of primary liver cancer, accounting for 85% of all the liver cancers. And in 2020, HCC was the third leading cause of cancer worldwide, with mortality, incident mortality rate was 9.5 and 8.7 per 100,000 person years respectively. Liver cirrhosis, that's the main causative or etiological factor leading to liver cirrhosis, 5 to 30% risk of progressing to HCC, and chronic hepatitis B, especially if hepatitis B starts in a neonate, or hepatitis C acquired at any time. Hepatitis B is a direct carcinogenic agent. Hepatitis C, although not directly a carcinogenic agent, but it brings a change in the liver, and with the DA, our personal publication says that the risk is 11% as against 5% routine cases, so definitely the risk is high. Maybe of comorbid involvement is there, obesity and diabetes mellitus, the risk factors. Smoking and consumption of alcohol, that increases chances, and unfortunately the male gender, the us, majority, not the majority, minority, they are at a higher risk of developing liver cancer as compared to the females, although the risk is not that. So surveillance, I apologize for this busy slide, and maybe the color selection is again not good. Any community where the risk is more than 1%, that needs, that merits surveillance. So definitely our country is the one which needs a regular surveillance. So a case can be made that every person who's suffering from chronic hepatitis, F2, F3 onward, I'm not sure about F2, but F3 definitely onward, that merits a regular surveillance. Maybe F2 as well, especially if in particular if the person is suffering from diabetes mellitus, obesity in combination, meaning by, so we can say that 30% of the population additional can be considered on top of F3. Primary objective of HCC surveillance is to identify people at high risk of developing early stage cancer, and thereby preventing the death, unnecessary death. Evidence from two randomized trials in China, mainly on hepatitis B. And if we go to the Far East Asia, everything is about hepatitis B. Whatever we have learned about early screening and we have learned about prevention of liver cancer, we have learned with the studies which have been done on patients who were suffering hepatitis B. And we really thank the population of Far East for giving us a window of opportunity to learn about liver cancer. And in patients with cirrhosis, meta-analysis from 2014-2022 confirmed the effectiveness of HCC surveillance. And 3 analyses showed that surveillance has significantly increased the detection of early stage HCC, improving the likelihood of receiving curative treatment and prolonging the survival rates. And in 2023, a meta-analysis of 70 studies with HCC surveillance was significantly associated with reduced HCC mortality. Additionally, HCC surveillance was linked to improved overall survival rates and increased rate of early HCC detection. Now, no surveillance is inferior to surveillance, so definitely surveillance is required, and based what surveillance is required, maybe a combination of ultrasound and AFP, every 6 months, in high-risk population every 3 months. EASL says that ultrasound alone maybe, but the latest guidelines all favor one thing, combination of ultrasound along with the alpha-fetoprotein every 3 months in high-risk population and every 6 months otherwise. Now, how good the awareness is there in our population? The guideline that we published last year, courtesy PKLI, session was held under the umbrella of PKLI, and the publication had gone out. Dr. Amna Subhan is here in the hall. She had published a data back in 2013, 2015. The level of awareness concerning the need for screening and surveillance amongst the population remains low. It's not just the population of Pakistan, general population, it remains low in the doctors as well. How commonly are we rigidly following the guidelines? To be honest, not many doctors. And even if we follow the guidelines rigidly, after every 6 months or after every 3 months, because of the lack of quality of the tools that we're using, are we picking up the cases properly? In quite a good number of cases, or maybe the type of disease there, in diffuse infiltrative type of HCC, we know that even with the most commonly used tool, the ultrasound, in combination with alpha-fetoprotein, we fail to pick the cases as in 70% of cases. So there are physician-related factors which lead to challenges in the HCC surveillance, and then there are patient-related factors. The physician-related, obviously, lack of awareness, and that's the reason that awareness, and I'm really thankful to Feroz Sans for bringing up this topic. And then lack of time. In a general physician clinic, in a busy medical practitioner's clinic, in a gastroenterologist clinic, in a hepatologist clinic of the cases, or in a public hospital where in a short span of 3 hours, one is to see as many as 70 patients or 80 patients. And similarly, in a specialist clinic as well, in 3 to 5 hours time, one is to see 50 patients. Are we really looking at or are we really concentrating on implementing the guidelines? Most of the time, the answer is no. And then most of the time, the care is in a non-specialty doctor's quarter, not just the specialty doctors. And are we using the appropriate tool? Then obviously, patient-related, people are complacent. Once the treatment of hepatitis C has been given, once the treatment of hepatitis B has been given, people go back. And now muffled MASH, we know it's a big risk. People don't accept muffled MASH. People don't accept that it can lead to other problems. Major challenge is CKM. But then, don't we know that liver cancer is also one of the good complication, not the main complication, and there's absolutely lack of awareness, and then people do have lack of resources as well. In Western world as well, in 2015, a study was conducted in UK and was published in Clinical Gastroenterology Hepatology, A survey of 131 primary care physicians found that HCC surveillance rate was only 65%, with merely 15% of those physicians adhering to the recommendations of biannual surveillance in National Health Service of UK. And lower levels of education, socioeconomic status are also associated with reduced HCC surveillance. A systemic review and meta-analysis, 29 studies revealed that only 24% of patients, one-fourth of the patients, underwent HCC surveillance in the West as well. And surveillance rates were significantly higher among patients under the care of gastroenterologists and hepatologists, compared with those managed by general physicians or general medical specialists. And study conducted in Thailand found that adherence rate to HCC surveillance among patients with chronic hepatitis B was significantly higher when they were under the subspecialists and not under the care of medical specialists. And patients with mast cell or alcohol-associated cirrhosis was less likely to receive HCC surveillance as compared to people suffering from hepatitis B or hepatitis C. So lots of questions can be thought of, and that gives a window of opportunity for the younger people to have a research on that. And there have been new strategies for HCC risk assessment. Now, this risk assessment is a comprehensive topic at its own. In hepatitis B, in untreated patients and treated patients, number of scores have been developed, and mostly these scores have been studied and validated in Far East Asia. And they've been country-specific. For example, China, for Korea, and Thailand, they all have been done, REACH-B, CU-HCC, CAG-HCC, LSM-HCC. They've been looking at their own problem and developing the scores of their own. For treated patients, REACH-B, and then for all cases, AAMP covers diversity, etiology, and ethnicity. So these are the different scores that have been talked about. AMAP score, which is more relevant to our society, where hepatitis C, B, and MEFIL MASH, all is there. So for that, we need to have 5 parameters: age, gender, albumin levels, bilirubin levels, and platelet count. And based on this formula, people have been divided into 3 categories. One with the score less than 50. Even if we don't do the surveillance, we're not going to miss out many. Then from 50 to 60, we're going to miss out a reasonable number of patients suffering from liver cancer. But if we do start screening and aggressive surveillance in people with a score above 60, definitely we are going to miss out as many as 70% of the cases who can be picked early in terms of liver disease. Now, in this era, we cannot stay away without artificial intelligence and machine learning. And machine learning is coming up very fast. Again, in machine learning, we owe a lot to the Far East people, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and obviously China, where based on the HPV patients, there's been a number of studies which have been published on this subject, starting from 2018 to 2024. I can count of at least 60 studies on this subject, and many studies have utilized clinical variables to predict HCC development with greater accuracy. And let me tell you, as compared to CAMP scoring and all these scores that we have used, there's been, based on this machine learning and artificial intelligence with new scores, people have been picking 80% more number of cases as compared to that. Now, what imaging tools that we have in terms of screening tool? We have standard transabdominal ultrasound, 2D ultrasound. We have contrast-enhanced ultrasound. We have CT scan, and we've got MRI. All these are available in our country. We just have to know how to use them properly and how to use them judiciously. Ultrasound, a very easily available tool. Har jagah pe available hai. There's not even a single place, I cannot think of a single place in Pakistan where 2D ultrasound, transabdominal ultrasound is not available. But is the quality of ultrasound good enough? Are the people sitting behind the machine, they are trained to pick ultrasound properly? Maybe yes, maybe not. And for that, the Society for Radiology has to come up with some kind of policy to train them effectively. I wish that Dr. Ramzan would have been here, and we could have persuaded him to talk to the radiology society, to train the radiologists to read the ultrasound properly. And studies indicate the sensitivity of liver ultrasound for HCC detection is 47%, which increases to 63% when used in conjunction with alpha-fetoprotein. But unfortunately, as many as 20% of the ultrasounds, they are of poor quality, not of the quality which is really required to pick the HCC. And factors influencing ultrasound quality include obviously the quality of the machine, the experience of the operator, and then in certain group of patients, the patient-specific variables in obese patients, obviously the liver is high set, choroid lobe, HCC cannot be picked easily, the nodule closer to the dome of the diaphragm again cannot be picked. So these are the technical variables which are unfortunately there, and one cannot rely wholly solely on the ultrasound. And ultrasound abdomen by an experienced sonologist, sensitivity is again not too high, although specificity can be as good as 91%. Sensitivity is 53% as compared to 47% by all the ultrasound specialists. Now, contrast-enhanced ultrasound is an exciting tool. I've been looking at the contrast-enhanced ultrasound ever since I started doing endoscopic ultrasound. An easy-to-perform test, but then, unfortunately, the contrast is not available in our country. It is expensive, and then it has to be done in a very time fashion. The person has to be very experienced to understand and pick. The advantage of contrast-enhanced ultrasound is that where CT scan cannot be done, contrast-enhanced ultrasound can be done, because in the contrast used in the contrast-enhanced ultrasound is kidney-friendly, and it gives us a sensitivity of 100% compared with 29% of 2D ultrasound, and a specificity of 96.1%. That's a huge jump. And in select group of cases, I think it can be of good choice. Yes, it is not effective when, again, if a person is suffering from MESL to MASH, person is morbidly obese, and person has got a lesion in the choroid lobe, or person has got a lesion very close to the dome of the diaphragm. So these are the technical caveats which can be there. Now, an alternate strategy can be annual CT scan as compared to the ultrasound. Now, annual CT scan alone versus annual CT scan along with alpha-fetoprotein, I think combination of the alpha-fetoprotein along with annual CT scan provides a good reference. The detection rates of HCC was similar with as compared to ultrasound. All we can say is the CT scan is not operator dependent, but interpretation is definitely operator dependent. The person sitting in front of the monitor has to be properly trained, has had to have good eye, and then the image quality has to be good, so that he may be able to pick an early stage HCC at a proper place. And up till now, the meta-analysis which have been done on this subject, they show that the annual CT and ultrasound, they're equally good. Now, two-phased, low energy CT scan, again, that can be a good tool. The studies have been done in Korea, the studies have been done in Taiwan, the studies have been done in Japan. And the studies, they show that the two-phase, low energy CT scan, that can be a good alternative to the ultrasound and alpha combination, and that gives us an advantage that we are able to pick in an early HCC in higher number of cases as compared to the standard that we are using at the moment. MRI with liver-specific contrast, very talked about subject across the world and not just in Pakistan. Although we're not using it, but people keep asking every time, especially in private clinics, the people who have got access to the net and people who can understand the latest information. Instead of ultrasound, they ask, should we go for MRI? Well, if you got the money, yes, you can go. But as a national policy, Should we be advising MR-based surveillance? The clear answer is no, but definitely in select group of cases, the answer is yes. The data says that it gives us a better chance to pick an early HCC, thus providing a better curative chance. And the AURC was 97% for MRI and 94% for ultrasound, highlighting the superior diagnostic ability of MRI. But is it statistically significant? We don't really know. And this is a summary of the three modalities. Again, as a screening tool, as a national screening tool, I shall say combination of ultrasound and alpha-fetoprotein is still the best. Otherwise, a biannual low-energy CT scan in high-risk population along with alpha-fetoprotein can be considered as an alternate. Why? Because CT scan is still available in most of the places and can be used in high-risk population. Now, biomarkers for HCC surveillance. We have got basically two markers, alpha-fetoprotein and PIVKA2. Alpha-fetoprotein, we are familiar with alpha-fetoprotein. We have grown up with alpha-fetoprotein. It has been validated almost everywhere. With PIVKA2, maybe that's not the case. And alpha-fetoprotein L3, they are well-established markers, although they lack specificity for HCC. Alpha-fetoprotein can be raised in other germinal cell tumors as well. And if a person is suffering from an active inflammation, especially, for example, in immunotherapy leading to immunotherapy-related hepatitis, one can have a big confusion in terms of whether this alpha-fetoprotein is coming from the tumor, or is this alpha-fetoprotein is coming from inflamed liver tissue. We cannot really count on that. And Blends cleaners, agglutinin-reactive subfraction of alpha-fetoprotein, does it offer a better chance? The meta-analysis show that maybe in combination in the scores that we use, it can give us a better chance, but again, it is a low sensitivity, and it can be used alone for HCC surveillance. So neither alpha-fetoprotein or no alpha-fetoprotein L3 can be used as a standalone markers for this surveillance. If there's a vascular invasion, PIVKA2 is raised. PIVKA2 can come from pancreatic cancer. PIVKA2 can come from cholangiocarcinoma as well. And it can be a good tool provided that it is interpreted in combination with alpha-fetoprotein. A comparative study between PIVKA2 and alpha-fetoprotein showed that it is slightly better as compared to alpha-fetoprotein with sensitivity of 71% and 64% with a specificity of 90% as against 87%. Again, statistically, it is not significant that we should jump onto PIVKA2. So the message is that it has to be interpreted in combination of the two. The combination of biomarkers, that's the way to go. In different parts of the world, people have come up with different scores. For example, Gallard score, gender, age, alpha-fetoprotein L3, alpha-fetoprotein, and PIVKA2 score, they've been developed to estimate the risk of HCC in patients with chronic liver disease. Now, look at this formula. It's a lengthy formula. At least I can calculate that, but for that, we have a smartphone in our pocket all the time. Just pick up the phone, feed the formula, or just request one of your junior doctors, and they can do the calculation. And a recent meta-analysis reported high sensitivity of 82% with specificity of 89%. And for early stage HCC, the Gallard score achieved a sensitivity of 73% with specificity of 87%. So reasonably good as compared to what we have been talking about in terms of specificity and sensitivity of ultrasound, and especially in those areas where the expertise is not there. Gallard score, when we combine alpha-fetoprotein with the ultrasound and all the other parameters, that gives us a good jump, and maybe that's the way to go for in our country. And the national societies have to sponsor a research program for our junior doctors to work on this and validation of the same Gallard score in our country so that we may be able to work on this. GARD score is another scoring system with combination of biomarkers, gender, age, alpha-fetoprotein, and PIVKA2. In comparative study, the GUARD score had AURC of 0.91, outperforming alpha-fetoprotein and DCP, and sensitivities of predicting early stage HCO 70.1% for the GUARD score compared with 41.4% and 60.9% for DCP. So significant improvement, and a GUARD score is considered positive if it is more than 2.57. ASAP score mainly for people who are suffering from hepatitis B, and it has been validated in China only. So combination of biomarkers, HES version 1 was launched a few years back. Now, right now we on HES version 2, and maybe in another 3 months' time, we may have the latest version, HES version 3 as well. But again, they need validation in different parts of the world, and right now it has been validated only in Far East Asia as well. Liquid biopsy is coming up very nicely, and there have been different markers. It can be in the form of a mutation in CTNNB1, P53 tumor suppressor mutations, RAS mitogen activated protein kinase detection in the peripheral blood, WNT and mammalian target of rapamycin pathways. These are the different ways. And natural killer cell signatures in the peripheral blood. These are different ways. And people are coming up with the different combinations of the molecular biology in the peripheral blood, and they are giving us a better chance in terms of early detection of people at a high risk of developing this disease. So towards the end, ladies and gentlemen, to summarize, people who are at risk, we need to categorize them into different categories: low risk, intermediate, and high risk. On what basis? Obviously, we need to come up with some kind of scoring system, and the ones which have a risk score of more than 60, they're going to go with the contrast MR, abbreviated MR, or low-dose CT after every 6 months, maybe in combination with alpha-fetoprotein or without intermediate. Moderate risk, 50 to 60, ultrasound, liver plus alpha-fetoprotein or Galliard-Guard or ASAP score, HESP scoring after every 6 months. And low risk, maybe once a year or just a close clinical observation, that's good enough. Liver cirrhosis, F3 fibrosis, for hepatitis B, irrespective of the presence of fibrosis, if the person has got a disease longer than 15 years, definitely they merit surveillance. In the presence of fibrosis, the answer is definitely yes. In the absence of fibrosis, maybe yes, but depending upon the length of the years that the person is suffering from. For MESLT and MASH, we still have to come up with any kind of recommendation. We know that it increases the risk of MESLT and MASH, of the liver cancer. But what should be the exact strategy? To be honest, we don't really know. And we still have to look at the data, and we still have to come with the data to come to the interpretation, giving us a window of opportunity to conduct research on this. I thank you for your patient listening and enjoy